Hello, and welcome to the second Public PharmaLedger webinar. My name is Martin Hunt, and I'm the Global Marketing Manager for Honorat Clinical, and I'm a member of the PharmaLedger Culture and Adoption team, who are responsible for bringing you this series of webinars on behalf of PharmaLedger. The webinars are aimed at fostering a greater alignment and a common understanding of the activities and approaches and the progress of PharmaLedger amongst its members and the general public. In the first webinar, we looked at the 4 supply chain use cases. And in this one, we're going to introduce and explore the 4 blockchain-enabled use cases related to clinical trials and health data. The webinar is planned to run for about 1.5 hours, during which time there's going to be 4 presentations, followed by a live Q&A with the speakers. During the event, we're going to be using Slido to capture any questions that you may have. So you'll see a QR code on your screen, and you'll be able to scan that and use it to post questions to the speakers and also to join in the instant polls, which will be popping up during the 4 presentations. You only need to scan the QR code once to join in the polls and to post questions to the speakers. And we'll take all of the questions at the end of the 4th presentation. And just to remind you that all of these webinars will be available on PharmaLedger's YouTube channel after the event. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Xenia Beltran, who's going to tell you a little bit about PharmaLedger and introduce the 4 speakers for today. Xenia.
So thank you, Martin. Hello, everyone. I'm Xenia Beltran, Head of Big Data at Life Supporting Technologies at Universidad Politécnica de Madrid and Coordinator of PharmaLedger project. I would like to thank you, all the people in this webinar, for joining us today and be part of the second PharmaLedger Trust-Centric Healthcare Journey. I'm going to start presenting the background of PharmaLedger, and then we're going to proceed to present 4 use cases, which are coming as solution at the top of the PharmaLedger platform, and which will validate the technology that we currently are developing in the project. So let's start. What's PharmaLedger? PharmaLedger is a project that is sponsored by the Innovative Medicines Initiative, which is known in the European Commission as IMI, as well as by the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, also known as EPFIA. PharmaLedger is a 3-year project that started in January 2020. For this project, we have put together a consortium of 29 public and private entities, including global pharmaceutical companies, technical partners, universities, research organizations, hospitals, and patients' organizations, aiming at having the vision to benefit the entire healthcare ecosystem, going from pharma manufacturers to the patients. Our goal as a project and under one consortium is to create a blockchain-enabled platform that supports, on the top of it, the design and adoption of trusted healthcare solutions, to share data in a new, standardized, and privacy-enabled manner. So somehow we can say that we are working in PharmaLedger in rethinking trustable environments for exchanging data. As a project, PharmaLedger tackles 3 domains: supply chain, health data, and clinical trials. In this webinar, we're going to focus on the areas of clinical trials and health data. First, we're going to present the use case on clinical trial electronic recruitment. Then we're going to move to the e-consent use case. Further, we're presenting the use case about using IoT devices in clinical trials. And finally, we will present the use case of personalized medicine. Linked to this context, we can say that something that COVID pandemic had made clear is that we were not ready to facilitate access to data in a way that researchers, scientists, doctors, government, and pharma industry could share it to make it useful to us as patients and society. So we think PharmaLedger is relevant to this context, and we are very excited to present these use cases to you. We really believe that the applications of the use cases will empower patients, increase digital trust among healthcare stakeholders, support medicine drug traceability and data privacy, as well as build a new culture of collaboration of sharing data in the healthcare. under enhanced security, compliance with data protection rules, and interoperability schemas. In this context, now it's my pleasure to pass it over Ken and Despina, who will present the clinical trial recruitment use case. Despina, Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Xenia. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for your attendance at this webinar. My name is Despina Dayani, and I am one of the co-leads of the use case, together with Ken Nezel from Pfizer. The purpose of this presentation is to speak about the clinical trial recruitment patient matching solution. In the next slides, we will start by introducing you to the clinical trials and the recruitment process. We will show you the current state and issues encountered in clinical trial recruitment. Also, we will proceed to demonstrate our future vision for the solution and the purpose of the integration of blockchain. Then, we are going to give you a breakdown of the value provided of the solution to its stakeholders, and we will show you the roadmap of how we're planning to develop the use case. First of all, what are clinical trials? Well, clinical trials are a type of research where people partake in a study that contributes to new medical knowledge. New treatments are developed, and they are ensured to be safe and effective through clinical trials. Clinical trials are designed for research purposes, not for routine care. So how do they work? The clinical trials are broken up into several phases, ranging from having a small number of 10 people to thousands of participants. As new treatments progress through phases, the scope of research increases. At each phase, there are multiple independent bodies that ensure the safety of the trial participants. So what is clinical trial recruitment? Each clinical trial has a carefully made set of criteria for who can participate. Discussions happen between the patient and the doctor at the clinical site, and the doctor explains the study, the benefits, and the risks. Clinical trials must find people who want to voluntarily participate and meet their criteria for inclusion. In general, recruiting for clinical trials has posed a significant challenge historically. So why clinical trial recruitment poses significant challenges to clinical research? 80% of trials fail to meet the enrollment timelines. 30% of those timelines on clinical trials are actually spent on the patient recruitment itself. A huge amount of $5.9 billion is spent annually on clinical trial recruitment itself. And even with the time and the money spent, only 5% or less of cancer patients enroll in clinical trials. Today, the study-centric recruitment methods are the norm. What happens is that studies find patients through the principal investigator, which is the doctor, who is actually recruiting them, or it happens through direct advertising. But we see in the future there are actually some emerging trends that could support and build upon this recruitment process through also enabling patient-centric recruitment methods where the patients themselves find the studies. In some of those trends we see, this includes an expansion of patient access to their health data. In US, the Office of the National Coordinator's Cures Act mandates access to patients for their own health information. There are also new tools that help patients put their data to use. For example, Apple Health gives iPhone users access to 400 health institutions in US, UK, and Canada. Also, there is a demonstrated willingness to participate in research, which is shown that from the fact that 80% of EU citizens say it would be acceptable to them to share their health data if the privacy and security are ensured. To unlock the potential of patient-centric approaches, we will need to make this trial pre-screening process more accessible. Currently, the process is the following. Joe, who is a potential trial participant, provides his medical information for trial A to the investigator of the site and asks whether there is a clinical trial matching for him. After he is pre-screened, the answer is unfortunately no. Then Joe goes through the same process for trial B, and that happens through a study website, but he receives no again as an answer. Finally, he tries again, and this is for trial C, and he receives a yes. As you can see, this process has a substantial amount of pain points. It is not friendly for patient use, there is a high cost involved for this process, and it is not efficient. The processes are duplicative, and the information is locked in silos. Now, Ken will speak to you about the future desired vision for this system.
Thanks, Despina. This is Ken Nessel from Pfizer. Let's now consider a future state that addresses the pain points that Despina was just describing. Here again, we see potential clinical trial participant Joe. But now Joe is using a web application. He provides some medical information about himself one time and records a permission to be matched to clinical trials. And this information is fed into a patient matching utility. This utility is already seeded with a catalog of pre-screening criteria from multiple studies across multiple study sponsors. A matching algorithm runs now to match Joe to relevant studies. And Joe can view on his screen in one place all the trials that match to his interest in diabetes. So to summarize the concept, we are creating a neutral, industry-wide utility to help patients or their healthcare providers more efficiently find clinical trials which match to their health profiles and interests. And this would be for any sponsor, industry or academic, and any patient or physician. The key features here are that first, the patient retains control of their data. They can grant access and revoke access at any time. A patient would also have increased visibility into how their data is used. They'll have access to a dashboard where they can see key metrics on match attempts and success rates. And a blockchain ledger is envisioned here as a key enabler of this use case, with the blockchain helping to ensure trust between all the parties involved. And fourth, redundant workflows can be eliminated. Right now, many sponsors create study-specific websites, and this shared utility could eliminate the need for all that redundant work. And finally, by pooling all sponsor efforts into a shared utility, we can make that utility meet the highest standards of data privacy and security. Let's now take a closer look at the patient experience in this future state. So first, the patient is going to be interacting with the matching utility through a web interface. And at the start, in step 1, the patient is going to enter some medical history about themselves. Then in step 2, the patient provides some additional information about their interests, as well as sharing permission that their data be accessed. And in step 3, the algorithm has now run, and the patient can view a list of potentially matching clinical trials. In 4, some of those trials may have additional specific questions, and the patient here can answer those questions to confirm that there's a good match between themselves and the prospect clinical trial. In step 5, now imagine this potential clinical trial participant has had a discussion with their doctor. They've identified a trial which they think is a good fit for them. By clicking on that share button, their contact information would be sent to a clinical site so that they could be contacted to come in for further screening and potential enrollment in the clinical trial. And in step number 6, this is the view of that dashboard. So a patient can be confident that even if the right match hasn't been made for them yet, they can see their data is working for them. Now in Slido, we have a question for you that we'd like you to answer at this point about whether you could see yourself as a user of this clinical trial matching utility. So let's address now the question, why blockchain? This matching utility just won't work without trust. Patients need to trust that their data is being used responsibly, and sponsors need to trust that the matching utility is fair and equitable in finding matches between patients and their trials. We see leveraging blockchain here as a way to enable this required trust. Operating the utility through a decentralized network means that no single party has undue influence. And we plan to have the full provenance of a matching transaction anchored to a blockchain. This is going to help ensure that the operation of the utility can be trusted by all parties. We believe there's a strong value proposition to this idea for all the stakeholders involved. For patients and patient advocacy groups, this is going to simplify that clinical trial participant journey. It's going to encourage participation in clinical research in the first place, and all the time enabling those patients to retain control of their health data. For those involved in conducting clinical trials, sponsors, clinical research organizations, clinical sites, this is going to accelerate the recruitment process. It's going to hopefully reduce recruitment costs by pooling investment, simplify operations, and will allow all of us to demonstrate a patient-first imperative. And for physicians, and this is the participants' physicians, it's going to enable them to stay current on clinical trials and help them support their patients in finding the best fit clinical trial. So what does the roadmap ahead look like? Well, first we'll start with a pilot. We want to implement that as a proof of concept to demonstrate the value proposition. Then we'll look at expansion. Clinical trials take place all around the world, so we'll need to expand to support different markets, different languages, and different disease areas. Next, we think there are opportunities to make this even more convenient to patients by integrating into electronic medical records, so the patient doesn't have to re-enter information that already exists someplace else. Next, there's even more we could do in step 4 here about employing emerging technology that would further enhance privacy preservation. And lastly, we think that once we have this infrastructure in place, we could enable even other use cases, really any use case that requires the exchange of real-world data. So with that, I'm going to conclude and turn things over to Hernando to take us through the clinical trial e-consent use case.
Thank you, Ken. We welcome you and thank you for joining our session on clinical trial e-consent. My name is Hernando Giraldo, and I am the Global Head of Digital Development for Boehringer Ingelheim. And I'm also the co-lead for the e-consent use case. For the next few minutes, we're going to share with you our use case and how blockchain can help shape the consenting process to help improve data capture, minimize non-compliance, improve the patient's experience in this process.
Thank you, Hernando. My name is Despina Dayani, and I'm the other co-lead for the use case for the e-consent. So before we take you through the informed consent process, we would like to explain the clinical trial process after the participant has been approached. The trial participant initially has to be informed on the study, and the informed consent has to be obtained confirming a voluntary participation in the study. After the informed consent form has been signed, the patients then get screened to confirm their eligibility. Their data gets collected and evaluated in relation to what the trial is checking. Then it gets shared with only the appropriate permission users that are participating in the study. Currently, the informed consent and the rest processes are done through a manual process. The annual reports from the regulatory authorities from inspection shows that there are over 50% processes that are inadequate to ensure the clinical trial's quality. There are over 50% clinical trial records that are inaccurate or not complete. Out of these findings, 5 to 10% are related to the compliance with the clinical trial protocol. The protocol is the instruction manual on how to do the clinical trials. Now, we would like to ask you a question through Slido, which is, which of the 4 do you think is the most important step in a clinical trial? So, which is the most important step of the clinical trials? It is the informed consent. What is impacted by it? It is a critical aspect because it impacts everything. The trial cannot proceed without getting an informed consent from the participants. If there are no participants, there is no trial. The blockchain technology can help adjust issues we currently see related to the protocol compliance, the completeness of data, and the quality. It is a one shared source of truth which adds immutability, automation, trust, and real-time updates. Since the informed consent is a key component, it can help manage this proposed automated process. Because of this, we would like to see how the blockchain can help with the whole process by incorporating the informed consent, as it can help manage the key aspects that need to be done before the trial starts and it progresses. So, informed consent is a process. The trial participants, what happens throughout this whole procedure is that the trial participants are informed in detail about the purpose of the study and its procedures. Then they're informed of the risks of participating in the study, as well as the benefits. There is also a disclosure of alternative advantageous procedures, if any, that could be beneficial for the participant. The participants are given an explanation of whom to contact for any pertinent questions or any research-related injury to themselves. They're reminded of the extent of the data confidentiality related to the records, and they are also being told that the participation is voluntary and that they will not lose any benefits by refusing to participate or withdraw from the study at any point. This process is cumbersome but extremely important. It is key that the language is understandable, the participants can ask as many questions as they want, and that there is enough time given to the potential participants to finalize their decisions for participation. Now, I will pass it on to Hernando, who will continue guiding you throughout the use case.
Thank you, Despina. We know that GCP inspections identify between 2 and 7% of consent-related issues. If we look down into the current process, we can observe that the processes are complex, inefficient, and non-compliance risks exist at every touchpoint. Because of our inability to have one unified platform for these process actors to manage trial conduct, we also see that data is siloed, less transparent, and confusing. This unfortunately presents the reality that in today's model, spot check inspections are limited to spot non-compliance. This adds cost and site burden to an already complex process. Now, as we shift our focus from the as-is to the to-be, we want to share a glimpse of the possibilities in blockchain to transform no matter the industry, the product, or the service. In 2016, Walmart ran a proof of concept to track delivery of food into their stores, from source, the farm, through the scanners at the point of sale. 2 years later, in 2018, Walmart was then tracking 25 products in their systems powered by Hyperledger Fabric. The success of this POC led Walmart to announce to all their suppliers that leafy greens would now be required to use blockchain-based systems in 2019. Imagine where they are today. The metric takeaway from this use case is that for certain food items in the US, the time needed to trace their provenance went from 7 days to 2.2 seconds. Conducting a clinical trial in a blockchain ecosystem brings in these elements that are missing today: transparency, security, trust, and efficiency. Trial data is no longer siloed. The actors see data pertinent to the trial participant status in real time. Even when the participant opts out, the status is seen by the labs as well as the other actors. This means sample processing, patient privacy rights, and adherence are immediately seen. The regulatory authority role switches from oversight to first sight. Real-time captures and real-time reporting offer transparency via regulators through their permission views. This changes the landscape for everyone, including our regulatory folks. When we look at the design concepts that blockchain offers, it becomes clear free consent and all the stakeholders are to benefit. From trial participants to clinical sites, sponsors, clinical research organizations, and even the regulatory and ethics committees see substantial gains. For the trial participant, it's patient empowerment. The clinical sites ensure auditability, traceability of data. The sponsors and research organizations ensure patient safety. Laboratory partners demonstrate compliance, and our regulatory authorities and ethics committees have confidence that trial conduct is GCP compliant, which can correlate to patient safety. In conclusion, we hope that this has been informative, illuminating, and inspiring. As we emerge out of this pandemic world, the timing for transformational change is now. Blockchain can be that catalyst for change. We thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Disa and Francesca, who will speak about the use of IoT devices in clinical trials.
Thank you, Hernando. And now I would like to introduce you to the IoT medical device use case. I would like to introduce you to Francesca Rocchi. It's a pharmacologist at Bambino Gesù Children's Hospital, Academic Department of Pediatrics. She works in the Clinical Trial Center of the hospital. She is part of our domain reference application in clinical trials, and she's our subject matter expert in the IoT medical device. Yes, my name is Disa Lee Chong. I'm the head of innovation within the Global Clinical Sciences and Operations at UCB. My role at PharmaLedger is co-leading the IoT medical device and also co-leading the domain reference application for clinical trials and the health data marketplace. So I would like to start by giving you a brief background of the current state and what we face today with the rise of various IoT medical devices and just devices in general, from watch, wearables, sensors, patches, phone applications, etc. And this has actually created more silos than ever. So this is one of the problems that we're tackling within this use case. As a patient, and not just as a patient, but it's also a healthcare practitioners, if a patient is using a medical device or device, potentially they might have more than one device, which requires more than one ID. Each device would have its own cloud or applications where the data would be stored. So in order for the data to make it meaningful for clinical trials, for example, or for researchers, is that they have to have either a weekly download or a monthly download of that information, and then basically be able to process and aggregate it, put in, applying the right standards and formats before analysis can be done. So that creates a lot of complication and I would say more time consuming and make the process more inefficient. So the challenges, as I already mentioned some of this, is managing the various data silos from the same patient in a verifiable way. There's no unique ID from patients and device ID and that connection. And there's that effort that's needed in various systems and the effort to do data integration in order to analyze the data. So basically creating this disconnected ecosystem. We also look at the issues that we've seen more recently about data breach and what blockchain could provide in terms of that cyber security mechanism. There's no common platform to share information, to track the various different devices. As mentioned, the data silo, having to verify the device, the certification from the various countries, also the licensing, the intended use, the firmware version, etc. So it just brings a lot of more effort in trying to verify that information. The lack of standardization and formats is also proving an issue, as more device companies are creating their own, we need to ensure that there's some way that we can standardize that to make it easier for researchers to review the information easily or aggregate the information easily. The time delay that some of these devices may have is more about the healthcare practitioner accessing the data, how quickly they can view the information or be notified information and be able to make quicker decisions on behalf of the patients. And currently there's no smart analytics, and this proves again the difficulty of trying to bring all the data at once to have a full visibility of the patient's health and be able to make informed decisions. So now I hand over to Francesca.
Thank you, Disa, for providing the background. Now let's move to the introduction of our use case and the reason why we have selected it. Connected health devices and remote monitoring technology represent an innovative strategy to promote health and improve patient management and care. So the physiological data of the patient and their data related to the disease are digitally transmitted via telephone or internet or video conferences from the patient home to a healthcare center, providing clinical information. This could allow early detection of the disease decompensation and so enabling early intervention and in some cases even reduction of mortality and hospitalization, and also allowed patient education, improving their self-management. Remote patient monitoring, even in the framework of a clinical trial, could improve patient outcomes, reduce healthcare utilization, decrease costs, provide abundant data for research, and increase physician satisfaction. Many devices, such as intelligent and non-invasive biosensor, wearable or handheld devices, implanted monitoring devices, and so on, used for remote monitoring technology, offer patient and clinician real-time data that has potential to improve the suitability of care, boost treatment adherence, and drive improved health outcome. Furthermore, we also need to emphasize the importance of telemedicine in the clinical and in research setting and secure data sharing by patient, avoiding unnecessary access to the hospital during the COVID era. We identified this use case with the scope to validate how blockchain could enhance and support the dynamic acquisition and processing of data from patient and medical devices in one consolidated view and in the framework of a clinical study. So we decided to develop a clinical study in order to validate and strengthen the use case and its purposes. To this aim, a non-interventional study in pediatric patients with chronic heart failure will be conducted in Bambino Gesù Children's Hospital, the hospital where I work, in Rome, in Italy. So the study will be conducted in a very peculiar and fragile population. A lot of studies show an improvement in the prognosis of chronic patients, and these studies are managed according to models of integrated therapeutic intervention through telemonitoring. A recent meta-analysis has shown that structured telephone support and telemonitoring significantly reduce the risk of mortality and rehospitalization related to heart failure. Anyhow, there are no telemonitoring data in heart failure patients in pediatric age group. So now a brief description of the study. The rationale of this study is to assess the tolerability and also the clinical impact of new generation telemonitoring system in the management, as I said, of heart failure in pediatric patients, as well as how blockchain could improve and support the dynamic acquisition and processing of data from all these patients. This will be a prospective, not-for-profit, single-center, open-label, single-arm pilot study of feasibility and tolerability of telemonitoring device. Bambino Gesù Children's Hospital is the sponsor of the study. We are going to enroll 20 patients from 1 year of age to 18 years of age, suffering, as I said, from chronic heart failure, who will perform 3 months of telemonitoring during the study. The device used in the study consists of several components. First of all, a unit for monitoring the patient's vital parameters, a transmission component, and finally a software for collecting, archiving, and presenting the patient vital parameter. The monitoring unit is non-invasive and consists of transcutaneous electrodes in patch type to be applied to the chest of the child, and a sensor for measuring capillary oxygen saturation to be applied to the finger. The data detected by the patch on the patient chest and the sensor on the finger are sent to the transmission unit and so send them to a private cloud where they are stored in a patient medical record. Patients and parents will also be asked to respond to the device satisfaction assessment using an e-diary at various points during the study. So the study will start very soon. At the moment, it is under revision by our competent ethics committee. Back to you, Disa.
Thank you, Francesca. So now presenting our future state, the proposed solution. So in the clinical trial, the participants, after granting permission to use their data and consenting via the application, electronic consent, they will be enrolled to the mobile application to use the e-diary. In addition, they will be granted or assigned the different devices in order to participate in this clinical trial or non-interventional clinical trial. The mobile application data will be transferred to the PharmaLedger platform, and at the same time, the data from the various devices will be transferred for their device cloud and then to the PharmaLedger platform. So where the data will be aggregated and then analyzed in a central view by the healthcare practitioner. In addition, the device provider cloud will also send the data to the hospital in terms of the device data in general. I mean, all the data that's required. The data that will be only transferred to the PharmaLedger platform will be the key information that's needed in order to basically submit to the non-interventional study information to be analyzed. So now I would like you to turn to Slido and answer the following question. So why blockchain? Blockchain will enable the IoT cybersecurity framework for remote patient monitoring, linking the different identifications from patient ID to device ID, and have that basically a device certification ownership that will be provided in the platform. It will be a trusted and verifiable data sharing, the way that we retrieve patient data from various multiple sources to be analyzed. It will provide that real-time verification and notification not only to patients but also for clinicians in order to improve the quality of life, the health outcomes, or the assessments of the health in general. It provides that encryption access control, providing that security and privacy to all the participants in the clinical trial, but also for researchers. It has that tamper-proof log, or in other words, audit trail of all the history and updates that are performed in terms of patient data that's being collected. It avoids the data silos, as mentioned, and a way that we can also have a visibility and that transparency of the data ownership between patients, researchers, and even device owners. And provides the standardization for the data analytics with traceable and verifiable notifications. So in a way, providing us more of an easy view of the data that's being consolidated, and again, giving us the ability to do a faster and quicker analysis and decisions on the participant's health or the patient's health. So now I hand it over to Francesca.
Thank you, Disa, for laying out the vision we are pursuing with our IoT use case. Now, let's have a look of the value of what we are envisaging here. So we see different value for the different stakeholders in the framework of a clinical trial using devices and IoT. So the stakeholders are, of course, patients, clinical sites, sponsor of the study, the device producer, and the regulator. So first of all, the patient. What benefit can we see from the patient perspective? Reduce patient burden, also in the setting of a clinical trial, is mandatory, and this could be guaranteed by reducing the study visit and maximizing the flexibility of the study without hampering the security of the data generated within the clinical trial, within the study. Enable patients to have secure access and better visibility of their own data could help them in the process of empowerment for self-health management. Furthermore, also, a great value is represented by the trust added to patients who usually are afraid to, let's say, share their data. What about the perspective of the clinical sites, so intended as investigator, physician, clinical trial unit participating in the clinical study? So having the possibility to have access in real time to the patient data from all the devices is very important and reduce the investigator burden of managing multiple platforms and access. This aspect also allowed to achieve faster, effective method of intervention in reducing, for example, even hospitalization and improving the patient prognosis with a great impact on their own safety. Last but not least, the traceability and also the auditability of data in terms of access and exchange are guaranteed. The sponsor of a clinical trial is the ultimate responsible for the conduct of the study and for the data that are generated within it. In this perspective, the continuous verifiable measuring of the trial progress is very important, as well as long-term outcome traceability and auditability, which in the setting of clinical trials are very, very important aspects to assure. Another important element is the real-time access to the key aggregated data for the sponsor, also for their interpretation and reading. And this aspect is very linked to the possibility to have, from the sponsor's perspective, a quicker decision-making strategy and quicker safety reporting of the clinical trial result generated. From the point of view of the device company, a lot of values could be envisaged, such as increased traceability, simplified vendor qualification process, device certification in various countries, and this could mean a lot, for example, for saving time and money, and harmonized data standard. Last but not least, the regulatory agency. From the regulatory agency perspective, we could envisage several potential benefits. such as a simplified validation process of the application for a marketing authorization of a device, for example, as well as a simplified verification of the device itself. The quality of the efficacy and safety data of the device that have to be generated within a clinical trial, and so the compliance to the GCP aspect, are usually checked during audit and inspection, which are pillars for the regulator, but these are also activity that create a lot of burden for the regulator. The possibility to reduce the need for audit and inspection could represent a great benefit, as well as the possibility to guarantee the transparency of certified data. Another big aspect that the regulator has to check is the compliance to data privacy and legislation. So at the end, for summarizing, the IoT-enabled clinical trial could represent great value in terms of amplifying the patient empowerment and engagement, enriching higher data quality and integrity, in reducing operational expenses during the clinical trial operation processes, and in reaching better remote patient monitoring. With that, it is my pleasure to pass it over to Beatrice, who will introduce us the personalized medicine use cases. Thank you a lot very much for your attention.
So thank you very much, Francesca. My name is Beatriz Merino, and I'm project manager at Universidad Politécnica of Madrid. And today, together with Christos Kontogeorgis from Democritus University of Thrace, we are going to explain our use case, personalized medicine. So first of all, I would like to start by giving you a little bit of background on where we are, which is the problem, and why we are envisioning this particular use case. So the main problem that we are facing says that patients have no control or knowledge over the data and the records that are taken on them. So in order to manipulate our data from any database, I mean our data because I am envisioning that somehow I can be also a patient, we'll need to go through time and resource-consuming bureaucracy with no guarantee of result. So with these problems or barriers in mind, here we would like to establish a real-world data space that, combined with health data from other patients, and based on prediction models using these in a retrospective manner, can determine the risk of an individual patient as well as the best treatment for him or her. This, for sure, will enable patient control over data and create a trusted environment to share data for research purposes. So, with this problem in mind, this use case aims to provide trust environment that support patient-centric solutions for value-based health delivery in clinical practice and generation of real-world evidence for research purposes in order to apply it to improve diagnosis, prevention, and personalized treatment. So basically, its goals are mainly four. We can define this in 4 blocks. To use integrated health data compliant with data privacy regulations for sure, for research purposes to generate real-world evidence. To leverage blockchain in combination with machine learning and artificial intelligence to improve healthcare provision, which is also an added value of this PharmaLedger project. To implement a dynamic permission for using platform. To introduce or even develop new policies that can protect patient rights by ensuring patient ownership and right of portability. So in one sentence or 2 sentences, the main focus of personalized medicine use case is to validate the use of blockchain technology in combination with machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques for the application of algorithms and models that improve the healthcare provision as a whole. Besides that, these models and algorithms will use integrated health data compliant with data privacy regulations and mentions for research purposes to generate real-world evidence. So I would like to ask to the audience to turn to Slido and answer this question. So now I will leave the floor to Christos to follow the presentations with the future state.
Thank you very much. This is Christos Kontogiorgis. I'm the head of the research group from Democritus University of Thrace, and now we'll see what are the future states of what are we going to do with this blockchain. And so this is the case, let's say, that will give us the access with blockchain to give to the real world data all the needed information and to start working on this main pattern, which means that we have the chance to gather data from hospitals, from pharmacies, from devices, or even optometrists. And the main things that we have to keep in mind is that we still give to the patients their freedom to save their data, to share their data when they like to, and to know, to have access to their data and to know how they will use their data. The second point is about the healthcare professionals, where we have the ability to provide them with data, helping them for accurate diagnosis, to help them prevent any risk factors from the treatment that they will follow for their patients, and finally to personalize this treatment. And the third, last but not least point is about researchers. Researchers will going to use this data and to use patients' health data using either artificial intelligence or multivariate regression to provide a prediction model for treatments and for information that will be very useful for healthcare professionals. Which means that the blockchain will have 4 reasons to help us to go further. These are transparency, security, trust, and interoperability. Which means that firstly, the grants will keep overview of all their data, which is the most important thing to help them feel comfortable with sharing their data. The second thing is that we save data, we give privacy and security about this data, and finally, with healthcare provision to improve better clinical decisions. And we have also to add to the previous things that this blockchain will improve the ability to connect data and to reduce the delay time, which is very important for especially some severe cases, to save time, to make things start faster and go faster for patients' treatment. So, if we would like to come to a conclusion of the whole this presentation, we have to keep in mind that from this blockchain we'll have all the stakeholders feel much more comfortable, and we will add special value to their needs, which means about the patients that they will have their own data and will give them permission to share data, and they have also the ability to receive feedback about their personalized treatment. The data providers to be much more safe with their data and make data available for further exploitation. About physicians and researchers, I will give them access and read rights on the data sets shared by the data provider, and also make analysis, execute models, and generate evidence on personalized feedback. And finally, we'll give the chance to model providers or even to insurance companies to make, let's say, their access to data and their clinical decision, or even the data that they come from the clinical decision, to have this insurance that these data are real, and they can use them for further policy about their, either when it's coming for government or for insurance companies. So with this slide, we're coming to the end of the presentation of clinical trial and health data use cases webinar, and we move forward for questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Christos. Thank you to all of our presenters there. So we've come to the end of the 4 presentations, and before we jump into the live Q&A with the speakers, we're going to take a quick look at the results of the poll questions that were being posted during the presentations there. Now, if you've not already voted, you might have a couple of seconds while the poll question is on the screen just to get your vote in. And if you've got any questions related to the poll results, you can submit them via Slido, and we'll tackle them in the live Q&A with the speakers. So the first poll question that was asked by Kenan Despina during the e-recruitment presentation. And they asked, if you were interested in participating in clinical research, would you use the PharmaLedger patient matching utility to find relevant and appropriate clinical trials? And overwhelmingly, almost 3/4 of respondents have said yes, sounds like a useful tool, which is very encouraging. So it's a good resounding result for the use of that. The second question was asked during the e-consent presentation with Hernando and Despina, and they asked, what do you feel is the most important step in a clinical trial? And as we can see, exactly, or just over half of respondents agree that informed consent is the most important step in the clinical trial, with data collection and analysis following, and data sharing following that. So interesting result there. The third question that was asked, which was during the Internet of Things presentation with Disa and Francesca, they asked, do you think this is a solution that your company would adopt in the near future? And again, we can see that pretty much half of respondents have identified that this is something they would consider adopting in a 3 to 5 year window, with 30% saying they're sort of nearer being ready to do it in 1 to 3 years, and 10% saying 7 years out. So for most people, it's in their medium-term plans to adopt that kind of solution, which is good. And finally, during the personalized medicine presentation by Christos and Beatrice, where they discussed trusted environment for patient-centric decentralized applications and the use of blockchain to leverage RWE for research, machine learning and AI and value-based health delivery. They asked about what word or phrase best represented what you believe to be the biggest challenge in delivering personalized medicine. And overwhelmingly, that word is trust. Empowerment, GDPR, data sharing. So I think they're probably the fine elements of what people are concerned about in terms of trust, showing there as the most critical challenge for personalized medicine. Okay, so that takes us through the results of the poll. We're now going to open the live Q&A session with today's speakers. So we'll turn to Slido and we'll have a look. And the most popular question that we'll take first was about, have we analysed patient matching utilities in relation to GDPR? I think this was asked during the first presentation with Ken and Despina. So I don't know if Ken or Despina could maybe comment on that question for us, please.
Hi, this is Ken. I can take that question. So doing a full compliance risk assessment, it is part of our process. Actually, in PharmaLedger, there is a whole work stream focused on issues of legal ethics and compliance. So there's been a lot of work done there to sort of formalize a framework for PharmaLedger. In the case of this specific use case of the patient matching utility, we haven't yet done the full GDPR assessment because we are still in a design phase. And until we have our technical and information architecture sort of settled, we won't be able to do that assessment because we need to know specifically exactly which data elements we're collecting, our process for de-identifying data, where data is being stored. So those all feed into a GDPR risk assessment, and we don't have those settled yet, but we know it's a part of our process. We know it's a critical part. And actually, we think it's part of our value proposition here because right now, many different companies are sort of pursuing the same idea of matching patients to trials in their own silos. And we're trying to eliminate that silo, pool the whole sort of ecosystem of sponsors together. And we think in pulling us together, we can come up with the best, the gold standard of compliance. And so that is one of our objectives and important to us, and we'll be getting to it soon.
Excellent, thank you, Ken. I think this next question is also one maybe you could answer. How would you communicate that the utility is safe? The communication would be worldwide, not specifically targeted. Would that be cost expensive? I think this was asked during your presentation, so can you pick up on that?
Sure, it's a great question. We've thought about a lot. It's really the question of how can we acquire patients into this utility? How would they become aware of it? How would they even know it exists, and how would they trust it? So we are still sort of working that ideas around solving that problem. We think the key is really referrals. We need to find the parties that patients already trust and use them as referral sources into this matching utility. So we've had some preliminary conversations with patient advocacy groups because we know patients trust those groups. Those groups represent the patients, and our focus would be if we can convince those groups that what we're doing is aligned with patient interests, they could help be advocates and point patients into this matching utility. So that's our approach.
The next question, which apologies, just disappeared off the screen, I think, was asked during the Internet of Things presentation by Disa and Francesca. So maybe one of those two could answer. The question was, the Internet of Things is not a new technology. So what's different in your offer from previous uses? So, Disa?
Can you hear me? So this is a good question. I mean, yes, the IoT is not a new technology, but the difference is that we are, by building this type of platform, is reducing the integration efforts. I mean, as you know, any device companies who would like to work with pharma, there needs to be some type of integration. There's also the device certification that needs to be proven. But the idea is that we're having a platform where we can all use, in this case, we will build one central, for example, device identification, where that device no longer needs to submit all this information or certification that is required by the pharma companies in order to ensure that the device is, the purpose of use is as intended per the specific country needs. So the idea is that by doing this, we are simplifying, I would say the efforts in trying to, submit all this information for us to verify the information, which could be all done in one simple step and can be shared across the different pharmas who are part of this, platform or using the PharmaLedger. And it's also harmonizing the data standards that we use. I mean, understanding, what type of data we would basically have this connected to PharmaLedger, what data would be on-chain and off-chain, because there's a lot of information that might be collected that we might identify already in certain point of time will be needed. Others that more like the raw data potential might not go into blockchain or Pharma Ledger, but maybe only the kind of like the analyzed type of data. So those are things that we're trying to do, is kind of basically simplify a process where by a device company might embed their solutions, and we might use for that specific purpose in different countries. So again, it's simplifying the process of not having to resubmit and having to evaluate again the certifications or the firmware of that technology, but just doing it once in that matter, and having a device that we already create a unique ID that could potentially use in the different clinical trials that are basically sponsored by different pharma companies. So that's what we're trying to create with this. It's and also bringing all the devices together so we can have a better visibility and central view of the data that's being basically consolidated for the specific patient or the participants, so the clinician, the HCP can make a better decisions or quicker decisions about the patient's health or safety. So that's what we're trying to build with this technology.
Super, thank you, Disa. Okay, our next question was asked during the e-recruitment presentation, so I don't know if Ken could pick this up. It was saying, are there considerations about monetary incentives for patients providing data for clinical trials?
Yes, this is Ken. I'll take that. So we are basically adhering to the standard practices around compensation for participation. We're not changing anything about how that works in the current state. I mean, typically patients are not financially incented to participate in trials. Some consideration may be given to the cost of their participation and some reimbursement for their costs, but they're not paid to participate, as that raises ethics issues and could spoil the impartiality of the research. So we're not changing any of that. We don't have any plan through this solution to compensate people in any way that they're not in the current state.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Our next question is sort of a wider question. So maybe Xenia, or one of the project coordinators for Pharma Ledger, can answer this. Blockchain has been used without specificity. Which blockchain platform, and how do you intend to scale the voluminous data processing and use?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Xenia, go ahead.
When we talk about the Pharma Ledger platform, okay, I mean, when we talk about the platform, we talk about the Pharma Ledger platform. So all these use cases are built as applications on the top of the platform that we have designed and that we are deploying. So actually, in our platform, we are based in a new concept, which is called OpenDSU. And this concept is key in the platform, and it stands for Open Data Sharing Units. And it's a technology that works as a container for data and the code being built in the blockchain. It's a container that is cryptographically secure and anchored in the blockchain and in the control of the user. So what is behind of this platform and this architecture that is being deployed and designed and built in Pharma Ledger is that from what we start in this project right from the beginning, our goal has been to be agnostic to the blockchain technology and remain as neutral as possible to the blockchain technology that is selected by each of the use case solutions. So for this purpose, for example, the OpenDSUs are also blockchain technology agnostic. They support any kind of programmable blockchain technology. So this is what we are building at the level of Pharma Ledger. We're building not only the capabilities, but also the infrastructure to support this. The platform is foreseen to be scalable. And actually, right now, the applications that are in the top are the ones that are representing all the 8 use cases, okay, that Pharma Ledger is developing okay, the ones that are in the supply chain and the ones that are in health data and clinical trials that have been presented today. But the idea is that it will host new use cases and scale for this data and support the applications on the top of this architecture that is and platform that is being built.
There is a follow-up question which has come up, which is who and which suppliers would make these blockchains a reality? This is costly work and there are no off-the-shelf solutions. So can you talk about the supplier issue there?
Well, this is something that is being discussed from the beginning of the project, okay, together with the design of this platform and the PharmaLedger infrastructure. We are putting together a whole work package and task, okay, to define how it's going to be the governance of the platform. And in this case, everything is being defined in this work package, and still there is, I mean, as commented before, we're in design phase. This is not a decision taken, but we are designing all this, let's say, approach that will go together with the governance of the platform and the blockchain producing PharmaLedger.
Actually, there's many questions coming in for you, Xenia. There's another one here. If you could describe the process for achieving agreement on the data governance by all the consortium for all or any of the studies that are going on.
Okay, so as commented from the beginning of the project, we have focused on the governance of the blockchain. But through all the developments, okay, and right now, for example, we have approached areas such as data interoperability through the DSUs, okay, adoption of standards, integration of standards as such as part of the data management. And now we just have been here for a year. And we are in our second year. And in this second year, we're starting what is called the sustainability approach of PharmaLedger. And in this sustainability approach, okay, is integrated what it's going to be or what it needs to be done and designed as part of the data governance. So preliminarily, what we have in our work to do, it's set out as a framework that to define the clear roles and responsibilities and interdependencies of those roles, okay? So this includes to introduce data policies, principles, data policies as common principles, let's say, for the governance body that is taking on the blockchain, guidance and working practices in the area of data management to support what is the data governance. So this is something that we are starting now as part of the sustainability plan.
Super. Thank you, Xenia. We have a question here, I think, for Hernando and Despina regarding e-consent. Is there any concept available about how to deal with future research consents as these last longer than the actual study?
So thank you. Yeah, let me see if I can answer this. So I'm assuming that future study would indicate that there's a use of maybe biosampling. I'll just take that tact and address it that way. One of the components that is not widely discussed here, but is also part of something that the PharmaLedger is doing, which is very critical to the other use cases, is going to be identity management. And identity management that has self-sovereign ID as well. So therefore, the ability to place these processes that we've discussed on the block or part of it on the block, and then bringing in a component like identity management allows us then, as the trials conclude, and we're still using portions or data from those trials, the patient's ability to self-identify and be anonymous and remove consent even after the trial is completed is one of the components that we're looking to also further develop. So hopefully it's the best answer I can give right now, but I think now we're talking about some really cool jazzy stuff for the future. So stay tuned on that.
Sure, thank you, Hernando. Our next question, I think, is back for Disa and Francesca. I don't understand how blockchain is used in the Internet of Things and personalized medicine use cases. How are you using blockchain? So maybe if Disa or maybe Christos from personalized medicine or Beatrice can jump in here.
Yes, I'll start, and of course,
anyone in the team can jump in. So the idea behind this is that we started to look at how we can use blockchain to provide that trust and security in the conduct of clinical trials. So this is just as one of the use cases out of many use cases that we selected. So we start to, I mean, the IoT device, I mean, of course, it provides I would say a portion of the data that we collect in the clinical trial. But the idea behind it is that we're using blockchain because it provides that transparency and the security and the trust of how the information is being collected. As mentioned, what we're trying to do is that we're selecting some of these devices that we can harmonize, how we can do the data standards and analytics, also basically reducing and simplifying the validation that we go through as a sponsors or even device companies in having doing the vendor qualification process, for example, the due diligence. So the idea is that, you know, by having a system or platform like this, that we can share some of this information and, of course, the device certification that are provided by the different regulatory authorities in the different countries. And it's just to giving that validity of, you know, how the data, you know, the collection of that data and how that data is basically interpreted at the end. So what we're starting to do here is just to focus on some of the use cases. Of course, the IoT being one of the use cases, and personalized medicine is, you know, just collecting that data, how we can use that for our benefits, and how this could potentially, again, accelerate the drug development process. But again, this is just a use case or two of the use cases that when we were looking at potentially how we can use blockchain as a technology in conducting the clinical trial.
Thanks, Lisa. Christos or Beatrice, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for this answer. I totally agree with that. Just to make the point on personalized medicine use case, that as we explained, is the focus of this use case is to validate the use of blockchain technology in combination with advanced techniques that like machine learning and artificial intelligence that at the end could improve the healthcare provision. So the focus of the blockchain is, I will say, is to provide a solution that guarantees data security for sure and privacy, as well as visibility of what is done with the data in the case of personalized medicine.
Super, thank you very much. Okay, our next question was asked during the e-recruitment presentation, so maybe Ken could pick this up. How would you guarantee that no excess information is given or asked for to a company that does not need these data for trials?
Yeah, hi, this is Ken. One of our design principles, and probably the primary one, is really the idea that patients own their data. And we want to really make that sort of primary in everything that we design with this use case. So that's why we do have this idea of a patient providing a consent or a permission, let's say, for their data to be used to match to a clinical trial, and that they can revoke that permission at any time. And with this notion of an algorithm, which is doing the matching. So in that way, it's not necessarily leaking data to different companies. The algorithm itself is the one that's performing the match. So the patient can maintain the ownership, and when they turn off that permission, the algorithm can no longer see their data or match them to a clinical trial. So that's part of what we're trying to do here to preserve the privacy of the patient and make sure there's no data leakage to any other parties. And as I mentioned when I was referring the future roadmap, there are even more intriguing sort of future emerging technologies in this space that we could see in the future. Not part of the current design, but perhaps part of the future design, where instead of pulling patients' data into a matching algorithm, you push the matching algorithm out to the patient. And so you could imagine a patient maybe having the data on their mobile phone, their own data on their mobile phone, and then never having to leave their mobile phone. The algorithm goes to it rather than pulling the data from the patient. So this is a part of the picture here, and part of what we're trying to do to ensure the primacy of patient self-sovereignty and patient data ownership.
Super. Thank you, Ken. The next question, I think, is to Hernando and Despina. It's a question around e-consent. How will the identification of the patient be ensured in a remote setting? So, Hernando, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I think this also kind of bears a little bit on the previous answer that I gave. So when we talk about e-consent or remote consenting, right, identifying who you are, as the joke says, on the internet, no one really knows who you are, yeah? I think what's important here is, again, we're going to be looking at ways where we can identify the patients or the trial participants in the home or in a remote location through the use of tools like SSID, like self-sovereign identification, or ID management tools that play nicely with the blockchain solutions like e-consent and the other things that are downstream of e-consent. So I think that's an area that, again, we're going to focus on. It's critical for the way we move forward with blockchain, but also from a consenting process, the ability to bring trials and trial conduct to the home, if you will, right? Remote trials and e-consent.
Super, thank you. Our next question, I think this is a sort of a high-level question, so maybe Xenia could pick this up. How to join PharmaLedger? It's asked by someone who says they have developed a scalable use case that fits 100%. Xenia.
Yes. Okay, right now we're in the phase of developing the architecture and the platform. So we interact with other use cases, also other projects and initiatives, but we will open for all these use cases and scalable use cases, okay, when we finish part of the deployment and finish the project phase. But for sure, okay, you can contact us at contact@pharmaledger.eu. We receive a lot of the interactions through there, and also we will be also very interested in see the trials that are going and that might be fitting, okay, for PharmaLedger as such, for sure. So either through the website or through our email, for sure.
Yeah, sure. Very good. The next question is related to e-consent, I think. We use data from trials for many secondary uses. Would this still be possible or require reconsent? Would be an issue, as then we may not have a full data set. So I don't know if Hernando, you want to pick this one up?
Yeah, sure. Let me give it a shot. So, or Despina can also jump in on this. So again, one of the components that we're looking at is the ability to not only just consent someone, whether it's face-to-face, end-to-end, ET, as they say, remote consenting away from the trial site itself, but also post the closure of a trial, the ability to actually, again, go back and get that participant's consent on future use of information. This leads us back again to the upfront part of the process, which is the ID management component. Being able to also communicate with the trial participants, patients, that a need has arisen and we now need their consent to move forward, reconsenting through the use of ID management within the consenting process. I hope I didn't confuse that too much, but again, it goes back to understanding the patient, understanding their journey, when we need to consent them, reconsent them, and as the trial continues into closure, also the ability to reconsent because data is needed and we want to continue using that data. So we reconsent with the patient again through processes and principles like ID management and self-sovereign IDs.
Okay, thank you. And I guess while we have you there, there's another question, how PharmaLedger e-consent solution differentiates with existing e-consent SaaS or SaaS solutions.
Sure. So if I do a landscape assessment, there are very few to none in our world right now. The IQVIAs, you name the platform, right? Anything from drug dev or if I look down the line, they're actually using blockchain as the underpinning to solutions. So that means that a lot of the principles, the trust, the immutability, traceability don't exist in the same level or the same caliber as they do when you put something on a block or you write data to a block. That's the biggest, right? Second, I think the importance there is the way that the data becomes open and not siloed anymore, and the ability to also build something that we talked about in the presentation, ecosystems. Yeah. So right now, a lot of the tools that are in place are self-sovereign, self-contained. They don't really provide a lot of views into the process. The way we're building our consenting module with PharmaLedger is through an ecosystem, giving views to many of the different actors. That doesn't exist in many of the platforms.
Okay, super, thank you. I think just given the time, we're just going to take one more question. The next question is probably maybe to Xenia or one of the team in terms of the technology. How many ledgers and nodes do you have on a possible chain code?
Okay, I'll try to answer the question. Just to comment that maybe when we say this, we're missing some concepts or bringing some concepts from the Hyperledger. So the first thing to comment in this area is that we are blockchain agnostic. Okay, so we can use Hyperledger, Ethereum, Enterprise, or any other. Also, as commented, our platform is based on the DSU. So the DSU could be a microledger, and we reduce the need of chain code or smart contracts, okay? We put the logic, okay, inside of the DSU as such to support this approach. So this is, I mean, this concept, I guess, comes a little bit as commented for the Hyperledger. So actually, we have a little bit an additional direction that is based on DSU as a microledger as such. I'm not sure if also someone else want to comment here.
Okay, so let's have a look and see what the top question is, and it is a question related to e-recruitment, I think. So it says, will there be an impact on inclusiveness if patients need to access an app to be included in trials if they don't have a smartphone? Is there any solution to that? So I think that's probably a question for Ken and Despina.
Hi, this is Ken Nessel. I can respond to that one. So no, there won't be an impact on inclusiveness. You know, in fact, our whole goal with this use case is to expand access to clinical research. So the traditional ways that people today get involved in clinical trials would still exist to them. So they could, use contacting by phone, a clinical site or a call center, or having their doctor connect them to the primary investigator. So all those traditional means would still exist. Nobody would be blocked from those traditional means. But in fact, we think that actually creating this utility would help expand access, right? Because in a way, it becomes a democratizing effect on access to clinical trials, because all you need is access to the internet, right? You don't need to necessarily have access to a top clinical site or clinical research center. Even if you don't, you can still discover where the clinical research is being conducted independently. So in a way, it's does democratize access to the research. So we actually see it as being pro access to clinical research, and in no way restricting that access. Thanks for the question.
Super, thank you, Ken. Our next question, I think, is for Xenia to answer. Who will manage these blockchain platforms? Xenia.
Well, it's actually defined how it's going to be managed. Since day one that I started this project, we have in parallel a task and an area that is defining the governance of the project as such. So we've been evaluating different models. We have some recommendations internally, okay, to how to approach this. And this is going to be defined and really shaped for the end of the project to see how the governance and the management of the platform is going to be provided. So it's in process right now.
Super. Thank you, Xenia. Our next question, I think, is for Disa. Do you see any conflict for sponsors to have real-time access to aggregated data in relation to being able to bias the outcome of the trial?
Not at all. It's actually the complete opposite. I think it's important that we have the real-time information to assess already the efficacy of the drug and the safety of the drug. And it's a quicker way for us to make decisions about the trial, whether it's going according to plan or not. So I think having real-time access to information is very critical. At the moment, that's what's happening in the clinical trial. I mean, of course, if we're looking at, blending studies or blended studies, I mean, that's a different thing. But in general, in a clinical trial, we do allow internal analysis in between to see the data, to see whether the trial is going according to plan and is meeting the objectives or not. And I think, having a real-time information, again, is to support the participants and also to assess the safety of the drug. So I think it's very critical to have that.
Super, thank you, Disa. Our next question relates to personalized medicine. So Christos or Beatrice could answer this one. How are you addressing a secure data ecosystem? Specific technologies for the different types of data providers, for example, labs and pharmacies.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So for the first question, how we are addressing a secure data ecosystem? So the answer is that we are using specifically blockchain, and in the case of PharmaLedger project, an innovation that we are using data shared units as the way to secure data in this case. So for the second question is the PharmaLedger platform allows to have different applications on the top. So it could be in one side end-to-end one or specialized by user, as mentioned in the question, like of labs or pharma. And the platform is technology agnostic also. So it also will allow to have any type of blockchain technology in any of these apps or solutions.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay, our next question relates to e-consent. So maybe Hernando or Despina can pick this one up. How do you plan to get doctors and sites and regulators on board with this idea?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So this is Despina. I'll be speaking on this. In regards to how we'll get doctors and sites and regulators on board with this, we currently have something on the project that is another team that is working on this. And also we have the collaboration platform that will be helping with getting them on board.
Super. Thank you, Despina. Our next question relates to personalized medicine. So back to Christos and Beatrice. How are you addressing a secure data? Oh, sorry, we have asked that one. I do apologize. The next question is, when could patients expect solutions to be available? So Xenia, if you could pick this one up.
Yes, actually these solutions will be taken to pre-operative environment at the end of the project. That's 2022. So following that will be and the idea is that they will be productized to be allowed for patients and other users to be used as such. However, from now through the patients organization, just to say that if patients want to see and want to collaborate in the development, part of what our idea and part of what our practice is that we're doing co-development. So actually through patients organization, you can come and participate and provide your insights. So how would you like to see these applications in the future? So it's a great insight for PharmaLedger to have the insights from the patients as well as from health providers. We have some already in the partnership as commented, as well as the patients organizations that are in the project. So please, it would be great if you want to participate and provide insights. So contact the patients organization to also support your view in PharmaLedger.
Super. Okay, Xenia, I think this next question you might also be able to help us with. Given that there are other similar solutions in development, how will you build the critical mass to ensure PharmaLedger is successful?
Well, that's right. Okay, but we are doing so also from the beginning. I mean, together with governance, we are also having some other task that is building this critical mass. Okay, it goes to patient through patients organization. We are building also a relationship with other projects, with other initiatives, not only in blockchain, but also a regulatory, let's say, level. Okay, so we are networking and actually building this critical mass to really disseminate when ready all the platform, and have already a community that goes technically and as users, okay, around PharmaLedger when it's ready.
Thank you. And I think you might be able to help us with this next question as well. Will Big Pharma own these solutions?
Well, these solutions, the ones that are built now, okay, are part of the consortium. So the consortium is rules and have, okay, several documents that are called agreements, and behind these agreements there are IPRs. But I mean, they are collaborative. I mean, this is a PPP, and all developments right now are done under collaborative approach. So it's part of the PharmaLedger and part PharmaLedger consortium, and however, this will be transferred to the next generation of PharmaLedger, let's call it like this, okay, which will have its own governance.
Thank you. And the final question I see there, I think this is for Ken and the e-recruitment. How would governance work of such a matching tool? So Ken, can you pick this up?
Sure. A good question. And as Zinnia just said, we're still sort of designing the governance model for all of these use cases. But at least conceptually, there would be a governance board that would be responsible for like the operation of the matching utility. And so, for example, if there's a matching algorithm that's being used in this case to match potential patients to potential clinical trials, and let's just say that in the future there needs to be some adjustment to that matching algorithm to improve its performance. We're imagining, like most of these governance boards work, there would be some consensus effort amongst them to say, are we ready to release this next version of the algorithm into production to improve the matching algorithm's performance? And then this governance board, which would be made up of the various stakeholders in this use case. And again, in this case, we're talking about both public and private sponsors of clinical research. This governance board would vote on, and there need to be some consensus amongst them before that next version of the matching algorithm would be released into the matching utility. So that's generally how we're imagining it to work in the future.
Okay, thank you, Ken. We've got another question, which I think is related to the Internet of Things. So if Disa could pick this one up. You mentioned a demo trial. Will there be white papers on the outcomes and plans?
Well, yes, I mean, part of the IoT use case and other use cases, we will be using this non-interventional study that's been sponsored by the hospital OPBG in Italy. So the information would definitely be out there as part of the trial information or the NIS study.
Super. Okay, thank you, Disa. Okay, so I think that covers all of the questions that have been submitted. So thank you to everyone who's asked a question today. But with that, we've come to the end of the second Public PharmaLedger webinar. Thank you to all the speakers who've presented today, and to the production team who've made the event happen. And thank you to the audience for attending and for your questions and taking part in the polls during the event. We hope you found it interesting. As I said earlier, a recording of these webinars is available via the PharmaLedger website and the PharmaLedger YouTube channel. And on the website, you can subscribe to the PharmaLedger newsletter, where you'll receive updates on the progress of the project. And you can also, on the website and through the newsletter, find the dates for our future webinars, which are coming up later this year. But until then, we look forward to seeing you at the next event, and thank you for your attendance today. Thank you.